75% of the country, Democrats, Independents, Republicans, agree that members of Congress should not be permitted to trade stocks while in office.
You have to include spouses in the ban. I also think you should make members of Congress sell the stock or put it in a blind trust.
I think our message is simply there is consensus around the basic fundamental principles that members of Congress shouldn't be serving their stock portfolios. They should be serving the people.
You see that? Those are Republicans and Democrats. The current rules around members of Congress trading stocks are incredibly lax. And in a very rare show of bipartisanship, several bills have been introduced to address this problem, with sponsors on both sides of the aisle. Last week, I described the status quo as, quote, the fantasy land of insider trading. All you have to do is eventually report that you did it. That very tweet caught the attention of my next guest. With us tonight, California Congresswoman Katie Porter. Congresswoman, it is always a pleasure to see you. Over the last couple of years, you and I have talked a lot about legally how there are CEOs enriching themselves, hurting their employees, hurting their customers, how in certain cases Republicans are looking to help the rich, help corporations, and hurt the little guy. But tonight I have to ask you, we've got these lax rules, and members of Congress on both sides of the aisle seem to think it is A-OK to use clearly privileged information to trade up a storm in the stock market and enrich themselves. How is that OK? I mean, many of them are your own colleagues.
Well, Stephanie, obviously it's not OK, but let me flip it around. Most members of Congress, just like most Americans, don't think these rules are okay. So then the question is, why haven't we passed one of the many, many bills? Many of them are bipartisan, including my Stock Act 2.0 with Senator Gillibrand. There are many, many bills. Why haven't we moved them? So I'll be honest with you. I think amongst my colleagues, Democrat and Republican, we see exactly what we see among the American people. 75, 80% of people think we shouldn't be doing this. It's a trust issue. The question is, why aren't Democratic leaders and Republican leaders moving this legislation over the finish line?
And what's the answer?
I think the answer is to look at who those leaders are and where their priorities are. I think it's very, very common for leaders of both parties to think that the reason we say Americans don't trust us. What we often hear is, well, of course Americans don't trust Republicans, or of course Americans can't count on Democrats. But the reality is this is not a partisan issue. Congress has an approval problem, and the way we get the American people's approval is to show that we are holding ourselves to the very, very highest standards. So I think there's too much finger pointing at the other party in Washington and not enough willingness to look at the system, at the institution, at the structure that we've created for ourselves and be willing to shake it up.
So have you and your fellow Democratic colleagues spoken to Nancy Pelosi about this?
You bet we have. We have pushed and pushed on this, and anyone who knows me knows I'm not done pushing. The House did have a hearing last week on this topic, and not surprisingly, all of the experts on ethics, on transparency, on good governance said the same thing. We need a ban on stock trading. It needs to be very, very strong. The qualified blind trust route is not enough. We simply need to outright ban trading. We could also go further if we wanted and just force people to sell individual securities before they go to Congress. It's a privilege to serve in this job, and that privilege comes with some changes to your lifestyle, some hardship. This should not be a tough one for people to, if they want to serve in the U.S. Congress, they should be willing to accept this restriction.
And with all of your pushing, has Speaker Pelosi responded?
Well, she did schedule this hearing, which she charged the Committee on House Administration with holding this hearing. But the reality is we have to get these bills across the finish line. The American people right now, and I hope we have a chance to talk about this, but the economy is both strong and troubled. It's good job economy. It's a good stock market economy. People are getting higher wages. At the same time, we're seeing inflation and higher prices. So people are nervous. They want to know that they can trust Congress. to create an economy that works for everyday Americans. And one of the ways we can earn that trust is by making sure that people know we're going to work for them. The economy that we're going to create is going to be an economy that's going to put more money in the pockets of hardworking middle-class Americans, not an economy that's going to line the pockets of Wall Street or of the wealthy. And so the ban on stock trading is part of earning the American people's trust that we can fix the economy.
How and when are you going to create that economy? I know the president talked about economic challenges today. Did you hear anything from him that is going to put your constituents' minds at ease, those who are so anxious about where things are going?
Well, we're definitely seeing proposals being floated and action being taken with regard to gas prices in particular. I think we are seeing movement on that, including both releasing more oil from the strategic reserve, being willing to lift the ban on ethanol, E15, during the summer, but also a willingness to hopefully hold big oil to account for price gouging. So I think we're making progress on that. With regard to the larger issue of inflation, I think the fix here is to encourage more competition in our economy. And have the right kind of enforcers at the FTC and the DOJ. And Biden has absolutely put those people in place. Let me tell you what I do not want to do and what I want to warn the American people to be listening for. When you hear someone say the problem is there's too much money in the economy, make sure that what they're not really saying is there's too much money in the pocket of hardworking Americans. The traditional fixes for inflation are to raise interest rates and lower wages. What we need to do instead is lower costs, and that's where I think you hear President Biden focusing on things like improving domestic manufacturing capacity, improving supply chains, and making goods more affordable. We should be the party of abundance.
It's not that there's too much money. It's that there's too much money in certain places. Katie Porter, thank you so much for joining us. I really, really appreciate it. Always good to see you.